Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thanks for joining me today. In today's video, I am finally tackling that most requested of all video topics, the Demon Lord clan boss. You've asked for it. Here it is. If you're ready, let's get started. Here we are, the Demon Lord clan boss, the most important fight in all of Raid Shadow Legends. Just so you know, this video is kicking off what I'm calling my clan boss week. All week long, I will be releasing videos about this fight, covering different aspects of all the things you need to know to progress right from the beginning of the game all the way up through Ultra Nightmare. We'll cover the clan boss calculator, we'll cover speed tuning, we'll cover champions that are really good in those compositions. But for today's video, we're going to start off nice and easy. For those beginner players, or maybe for those veterans who need a little bit of a refresher, today's video is going to be a complete beginner's guide to the Demon Lord clan boss. We'll talk about the fight, all the mechanics of the fight, the things that you need to know. We're also going to talk about how to get started with the clan boss on the right foot and how to plan your future progress through the different difficulty tiers. So let's go ahead and start with a description of the fight and make sure we have all the mechanics down so we know exactly what to look for. Okay, here we are on the clan boss page. Let's go ahead and take a look at the guide. Now, there are several mechanics you need to understand here in order to build an effective clan boss team. But let's start out with just a basic explanation of how this fight progresses. The first thing you need to know is that the entire fight only consists of one round. So if you have any skills on any of your champions that discuss like power over rounds or attacks over rounds, this is all one round. There will be many, many turns, but it all counts as a single round. That being said, the clan boss has a cycle of 3 turns. So we want to understand this 3-turn cycle. And that's where the description of the attacks come in here. Now, these are not actually in order. They're in reverse order for some reason, but the clan boss has 3 attacks. The first one is Crash Through. This attack attacks all enemies 4 times and places a 25% increase attack buff on the Demon Lord for 2 turns. The one thing you need to know about this skill is that the Void Demon Lord does not have this increase attack buff. The second turn in the cycle is Swirling Darkness here, attacks all enemies 2 times and places a 25% decrease accuracy debuff for 2 turns. Now, this is the magic affinity boss. That debuff of decrease accuracy is dependent upon the affinity. You don't necessarily have to memorize them all, but the magic affinity boss drops the decrease accuracy. The force affinity boss drops a decrease attack debuff. The spirit affinity drops a decrease speed debuff, and the void affinity drops poison debuffs. Finally, the third attack in the cycle is Crushing Force. We just know this as the clan boss stun. So this attacks one enemy and places a stun debuff for 1 turn on that enemy. This debuff cannot be resisted. Damage inflicted is proportional to enemy max HP. So one of the things about this is it cannot be resisted, whereas the other debuffs can be resisted, but generally you're not going to worry too much about resistance in this fight. And managing the stun is very important, and we'll talk about that more as we get into the Demon Lord mechanics. Now, the clan boss also has several passives. The first one here basically makes him immune to pretty much every form of CC, turn meter reduction, max HP, swapping effects, all that stuff. It also reduces the damage that the Demon Lord receives from HP burn and poison debuffs, and also enemy max HP hits. So basically, in addition to very high defense and very high HP pool, the Demon Lord also has this infernal resilience that reduces the damage that he takes from some skills. Regardless of this passive, HP burns and poisons are still the most effective way to deal damage in this fight, and we will get more into that when we talk about team compositions. The next passive is Gathering Fury, and this is true for every single difficulty tier of clan boss, but starting from the 10th turn, the damage inflicted by all skills increases each turn. So you just basically get a percentage increase of damage each turn. The damage increases by the same percent each turn and accumulates over multiple turns. Starting from the 20th turn, the damage is increased by a greater amount. So it ramps up from 10 to 20, and then from 20 upward, it ramps up faster. At the 50th turn, all attacks will ignore any block damage and unkillable buffs on each target. Now, that's not going to matter so much for this video, but you should know there is a turn limit of 50 turns on unkillable compositions. So if you build an unkillable composition, you want to do all of your damage within 50 turns. If you have a killable composition and you are very survivable, very tanky, you have a good support crew that is keeping you alive and going, then you will be able to extend potentially beyond 50 turns, maybe even hundreds of turns. The final passive here is Almighty Immunity. That makes the boss immune to all CCs. It doesn't say it here, but the boss is also immune to slows and, of course, all turn meter effects. Another effect here you can see is you cannot increase the cooldown of any of the boss's skills. So that 3-turn cycle will happen without interruption through the entire duration of the fight. Okay, now let's start to talk about the basics of a clan boss team composition. One thing you want to consider is that the longer you can survive this fight, the more damage you are going to do in the long run. So the longevity of your team matters. Think of it this way. If you had 5 glass cannons who could all do 1,000,000 damage with a single hit, but they only got 1 turn, you would get 5 million damage. However, if you built 1 glass cannon damage dealer with 4 support champions that kept that champion alive for 5 turns, that champion would deal 5 million damage. Plus, you would get the damage from all of the support champions as well. So basically, the glass cannon route doesn't work here. You're much better off with a tanky team that goes a long time. And there are additional factors that play into that reasoning. The first is the way poisons and HP burns work. Okay, I am here on hellhades.com. This is a great community resource. I've talked about it before. And here I'm just looking at the buff and debuff descriptions. If you look at poison right here, it says that poisons damage the target champions by 2.5 or 5% of their max HP at the beginning of their turn. What that means is if you poison the clan boss will take damage when it goes. So having it go many, many times with poisons up is a really good way to cause a lot of damage on the Demon Lord. Remember the second part of this as well. Damage scales in accordance with the target champion's max HP. Now, the clan boss has an absolutely massive HP pool, and as the difficulty increases, that HP pool actually goes up. So what that means is poisons, while valuable at the lower difficulty levels of clan boss, actually become more valuable as the clan boss gains HP. Regular attacks, direct damage attacks from your damage dealers will do less damage as you scale up in the different difficulty tiers. As the difficulty tier goes up, the clan boss gets more defense, and that defense mitigates more of your damage. However, as the difficulty scales up, the clan boss also gets a larger HP pool, which means poisons will hit harder as the clan boss difficulties ramp up. So your best bet is to invest in at least 1 poisoner, maybe 2 poisoners, or an HP burner, maybe an HP burner with HP activation or HP burn activation. Those would be your best opportunities to get that max HP percentage hit on the clan boss. But again, remember, these activate when the clan boss takes a turn. So the more turns the clan boss takes, the more damage those debuffs, those poisons and HP burns will do. So extending the life of your team with these debuffs is the best way to do damage to the clan boss. Now, there are a lot of other debuffs and buffs that you can bring onto a team that are going to help you extend that fight and do more damage. So let's start with extending the fight, because that's really the most important thing. If you can extend the fight and bring some poisons, you're going to do a lot of damage, like we said. So how do we extend the fight? There are a number of buffs that can extend the lifespan of your team composition. One of the most important for clan boss is ally protection. Now, with an ally protection buff, the caster champion takes 25 or 50% of the damage inflicted upon the target champion. Now, this is calculated before any buff or multiplication on the damage, and that's incredibly important for the clan boss. You want to remember that the clan boss has that Gathering Fury. Right, that Gathering Fury passive at the 10th turn starts ramping up the damage that the clan boss does. If you have an ally protector out there, all of the damage that the ally protection champion takes is calculated before that Gathering Fury gets applied. So that basically wipes out Gathering Fury if you have ally protection up. Now, obviously, if your ally protection champ has the buff up on everybody else on the team, you're going to be taking the damage that everybody else would take. So that is significant. So you need this to be a very tanky champion, and you need to have some other way of keeping this champion alive. We'll talk more about that as we progress into team compositions. Now we're going to skip over block damage because that is a component of an unkillable clan boss team, but we are going to talk about some other buffs here that can extend your life. Block debuffs is a way to ignore the stun and the other debuffs. That's pretty good. Continuous heals, obviously, are going to heal your champions from some damage that they take. In addition, you have increased defense. That's a really good buff to have on your team to extend the life of that team. Everybody is going to take less damage because they have more mitigations up. You can provide your team with shields. So any tank or support that provides shields, that means that shield is going to get hit before your HP bar does. So that's a way to extend your life. Strengthen buffs are a really strong buff. These do a flat damage mitigation, either 15% for the lesser version or 25% for the stronger version. And that literally just takes damage right off the top. So 25% reduced damage is great. Perfect Veil is also another one that people forget about. Remember that Veil and Perfect Veil also provide damage mitigation. 7.5% damage mitigation for Veil and 15% damage mitigation for Perfect Veil. So a Perfect Veil is as good as a lesser strengthen buff. If you can get them both onto a team, that's a lot of damage mitigation that you are adding. All of these buffs will extend the life of your team, allowing you to do more damage. There are also debuffs that can extend the life of your team. There's one that's very important, and then there are a couple of others that can also help. The single most important debuff is decrease attack. The Demon Lord does damage based on attack. So if you can lower that attack stat, you're going to take less damage as a team and extend your life. In addition, decreased crit rate and decreased crit damage can help. I would actually focus on decreased crit rate. The clan boss only has a 15% chance of landing a critical hit. So if you drop that to 0, then you don't have to worry about the crit damage. But you could also lower the crit damage or lower the crit damage instead of lowering the crit rate. And that would also prevent the crits that the Demon Lord applies from potentially wiping out your team. The last potentially useful debuff here is decreased accuracy. It's not particularly important, but remember that those debuffs that get applied on the second AoE can be resisted. And so by decreasing the accuracy of the boss, you can make that resistance easier. So you can potentially resist the poisons or the decreased slows or whatever else the clan boss is throwing at you. Remember that you cannot resist the stun. So no amount of decreased accuracy or increased resistance or anything like that is going to prevent the stun. The only thing that can prevent the stun is a block debuffs buff. So if you can get that on your team, that will help you prevent the stun. Okay, now let's talk about making the most out of your damage. Now, if you want to increase your damage, you have several buffs and a lot of debuffs that you can use in order to increase your damage. One really nice buff is counterattack. Now, when the clan boss does his AoEs on the first and second turn of his cycles, if you have counterattack up, everybody will get another opportunity to go, right, with their A1s. So if you have A1 poisoners or A1 HP burners, you can get those up. If you have any champions who have debuffs on their A1, like decreased attack or decreased defense, that gives them an extra chance to land those debuffs as well. Also remember, even though we haven't gotten to masteries yet, that one of the major sources of damage comes from the tier 6 masteries. So if you can get War Master or Giant Slayer on your champions, they can proc that with their A1s. So additional A1s from counterattack can actually bring a lot of damage. Increase accuracy, increase attack, and increase crit rate all also play. These are ways to make sure that you are getting the maximum damage out of your team. Increase accuracy obviously allows you to land all the debuffs you need to land. Increase attack makes your direct damage hit harder for your attack-based champions. Increase crit rate can make sure that you are landing crits at a higher rate. You could also have increased crit damage, which would be a multiplier of 15 or 30% extra damage on your direct damage again. Remember, the poisons and the HP burns don't crit, so if you're using that as your primary damage source, increased crit rate and increased crit damage don't play as much on those champions. Another source of damage can be increased defense. If you have any defensive-based champions, they're going to hit harder with increased defense up. So increased defense can be really nice because it not only extends the life of your team, but it can make your tanks and supports and other defensive-based damage dealers hit harder. Increased speed is a great all-around buff. It's going to make you more survivable, and it's going to allow you to land more damage because more turns means more debuffs, means more buffs. Reflect damage is really nice because this reflects damage that you take from the clan boss. So the clan boss is hitting you pretty hard. Let him take some of that damage in return. Now we come to debuffs, and there are a ton of debuffs that are going to help you do more damage against the clan boss. In addition to poisons and HP burns, we also have bombs. Now bombs can be an interesting way to do damage against the clan boss. It depends on the champion and how those bombs are used, but a lot of bomb champions actually have additional multipliers against bosses. And remember that bombs ignore defense. They don't necessarily, I think they ignore 50% of defense on bosses. So if you have a good bomb champion, maybe a bomb champion you've built for some other boss like Bommel, or maybe you've built it for dungeon bosses, this could be a good damage dealer for a clan boss composition. So other than damage dealing debuffs, bombs, poisons, and HP burns, there are two additional debuffs that are the primary way to squeeze extra damage onto the clan boss. And the first is decreased defense. So here it says when this debuff is applied, it reduces the champion's battle defense by 30 to 60%. So this is important. You want the larger version of this. That means every direct hit, every non-poison or HP burn damage that you deal, like anything you deal with a weapon, that's going to hit harder because the defense of the boss is being decreased. This is a hugely important debuff, especially in early game clan boss, because you probably don't have a ton of poisoners. You may not have a ton of other buffs and debuffs, but if you can just get decreased defense down, if you have a Deacon Armstrong, or if you have a War Maiden, you can apply this to the boss, and this is going to increase your damage significantly. The other major debuff that you really need is Weaken. Weaken increases the damage received by 15% or 25%. So the strong Weaken here, or the higher level of Weaken, increases the damage by 25%. And that's a flat multiplier. This actually works with both direct damage and with poisons and HP burns. So a Weaken is an incredibly powerful way to increase your damage. It's just a 25% addition. That's it. It's just a 1.25 multiplier. That's what Weaken does. So get this debuff onto the boss if you can. The final debuff you may want to consider is poison sensitivity if you are using a poison damage dealer. So when you apply poison sensitivity, poison damage is increased by 25% or 50%. So that's a lot of extra damage from the hardest hitting debuff for Demon Lord Clan Boss already, right? So we know that poisons are the way to go. If you can get poison sensitivity onto the Clan Boss, that's really going to increase the amount of damage your poisons do. So now that we know all the buffs and debuffs we want to try to bring in our team composition, by the way, you don't need every single one of those. You're just trying to get as many as you can on effective champions into the squad. So for instance, you may be able to bring Weaken but not decrease defense, or the other way around. That's okay. Either one will increase your damage. Perhaps you don't have HP burn, but you do have poisons. Great, then focus on your poisons and maybe see if you can get a poison sensitivity champion. If you're trying to extend the life of your team composition, then you could bring Strengthen, or you could bring Increased Defense, or you could potentially bring both. But again, any of these buffs and debuffs will allow you to do a better job in the Demon Lord fight. Now, one of the things that's going to happen as you ramp up in the difficulty tiers of the boss fight is that, one, we already talked about, the poisons are going to do more damage, the HP burns are going to do more damage, because the clan boss gets a higher and higher HP pool. But in addition to getting more HP, the clan boss also gets more defense, more speed, and more resistance. The speed and the resistance are really important because you want to be going faster than the Demon Lord in most cases. So as you ramp up, you're going to need to increase the speed of your champions. But even more importantly than speed, you're going to need to increase your accuracy. This is the Raid Shadow Legends Stages tool. Now you can find the Stages tool by going to the Raid Shadow Legends drop-down menu here, and then under Tools, it is the second tool available. When you get here, you're going to want to choose your encounter type, so you can actually look at all of the bosses in the entire game. This is an amazing tool that hellhades.com offers, so you want to be familiar with it. And the Stages tool will let me know all of the stats associated with the Demon Lord at that difficulty level. So if I go to the easy stage, you can see the clan boss has 19 million HP and runs at a speed of 90, and then has a resistance of 30. Now the orange numbers here are the accuracy that you would need to overcome that resistance. Likewise, when you see that the boss has 0 accuracy, the 105 is the resistance number you would need to resist the effects of the Demon Lord. So if you are looking for how much accuracy you need for any given stage, or if you're looking for how much resist you need to resist the effects of the affinity clan bosses at any given stage, these are the numbers. As you go up, you can see that those increase rapidly. So let's go all the way up here to Ultra Nightmare. At Ultra Nightmare, the Demon Lord has over 1 billion HP. That's why poisons do so much good work for us. You can see that the speed has increased to 190. And you can see that in order to land your debuffs, you are going to need an accuracy of 330. Now, you can just come in here and check any of the tiers that you're currently at or currently trying to get to. So let's say you are currently on hard and you're trying to get to brutal. At hard, I need 100 accuracy in order to overcome the 75 resistance of the Demon Lord. And that's not a lot. You can get up to 100 relatively quickly with your debuffers. But as soon as you start pushing into brutal, you'll notice that this jumps and you're going to need an extra 25 accuracy. Again, it's a reasonable number, but you do want to account for it. If your poisoners aren't landing their poison debuffs, if you're not landing your decrease attack, if you're not landing your weaken, all of those can affect your end result, how much damage you end up doing. Either because if you're not landing the debuffs that are going to keep you alive, like decrease attack, your run may end early. Or if you're not landing your damage dealing abilities like weaken or poison or HP burn, you're not going to do as much damage. So make sure that as you scale up in difficulty, you also make sure that your debuffers and your damage dealers have the accuracy they need to land their skills. Okay, so now let's start talking about team compositions in the early game. When you first start, you're only going to have a few strong champions. You'll have your starter champion. Maybe you'll have one additional champion you got from a promo code. You may even have a login reward champion. So in my particular case, I have Deacon Armstrong as my promo code champion, and we have Wukong here, Sun Wukong, as the login reward champion. Athel is my starter champion, and those are my 3 strongest champions. And that's likely to be the way everybody's account looks really early in the game. Now, what roles are all of these champions playing? Well, again, you're not going to have a ton of choices early in the game, but you want to make sure that each champion fulfills its role properly. So we have a speed aura here with Deacon Armstrong, which is going to allow everybody to take more turns. In addition, Deacon Armstrong has a turn meter fill, which is going to speed up my team. He also has a drop defense, which is going to allow us to do more damage. He also has a leech, and the leech is incredibly important because by getting the leech out there, that's going to allow my champions to heal off of their damage, thereby potentially extending their lives. Leech also synergizes really well with War Master and Giant Slayer procs. So if you have that tier 6 of your masteries unlocked, like Athel does here, when she lands a War Master proc, if that leech is out there, she will heal her entire HP pool because a War Master proc is based on the max HP of the enemy. So it's going to be the biggest hit that she lands, and therefore she's going to get a massive heal off of that. So leech can be one way to keep your champions alive. Another way to do that is with lifesteal gear. In addition to that, you can use things like regeneration gear and immortal gear. Anything that brings additional survivability to your team can help, with one exception, which is that shields generally don't matter that much in Clan Boss. The reason is shield sets, the shield only lasts for 3 turns. And because the Demon Lord starts off hitting very weakly and it ramps up over time, generally those first 3 turns aren't particularly dangerous to you. And they're not enough turns to get you the damage you need to 1 or 2 key that difficulty level. So you can basically ignore shield sets early on, even forever, really, in Demon Lord Clan Boss. The one exception being maybe a bolster set. It gives a shield, sure, but really it also gives a regeneration effect. So it is a shield set and a regeneration set in one. And so that would be a good artifact set to use on somebody that you were trying to keep alive, like a tank or a reviver or a healer. Now, while I don't think this is a particularly good team composition, every champion in this team composition does a job that helps me out with Clan Boss. Athel is my primary damage dealer, but she also brings a weaken. So she does 2 things really well here. Wukong, in addition to being a damage dealer, he does a couple of things. The biggest thing here is that he can remove the Clan Boss's increase attack. By removing that increase attack buff that the affinity Clan Bosses get, that can extend my life overall. Also, he can become the stun target. The nice thing about Wukong being the stun target, if he's weak affinity like he is here, is that if he gets killed, he has his built-in passive revive, which will allow him to come back. And so you don't need to worry about reviving him or healing him with some other champion. You can just let him die and he'll come back over and over and over again. So that's nice. Jamarsa here is providing 2 or 3 different services to the team. 1, she has a heal. 2, she has a passive that reduces the cooldown of other champions. And then 3, she has a revive. Now, the revive is not great enough to really make a huge difference, but sometimes in the early game, you only need 1 or 2 more rounds. So if I can make Jamarsa really tanky, and then if Athel dies, I can bring Athel back. Maybe Athel can heal up a little bit with her lifesteal gear and get 2 or 3 more hits in. That might be enough to get me from a 2 key to a 1 key on easy or normal. Finally, I have another champion here who applies poisons. I don't have any really good poisoners on my team, so Hyria here does that. She also has an ally attack, so she's bringing extra damage. One of the things that you'll notice is I have no survivability buffs or debuffs. I don't have a decrease attack right now. I don't have a strengthen or an ally protection or an increased defense. So I am struggling right now early game with this team, but at least every single champion on this team has a purpose that helps me somehow. I am able to 1 key easy, I am able to 2 key normal, and I'm very, very close to a 1 key on normal. I think as soon as I get Hyria here to level 50, that I will be able to 1 key normal on most affinities. And that's going to allow me to get to the hard difficulty level of clan boss. I do actually have another champion here that I could consider swapping in. So I have Balthus Droglord. Now, the reason I moved him in place of Wukong is because he has a decreased attack. Now, Wukong was removing the buffs that the affinity clan bosses were putting on themselves, that increased attack. Now, that increased attack is only 25%. Balthus Droglord has a 50% decreased attack ability on his A1. So if you want to know, is it better to remove the increased attack that the boss has, or is it better to place a decreased attack debuff in addition to it? It's better to place the debuff. Think of it this way. Let's say the enemy increased their attack by 50%. That would be an increase of 50% damage. If you then decreased that number by 50%, that takes it back down to 75%. So if you just removed it, it would go from 150 to 100. But if you debuff it, it goes from 150 to 75 because 75 is half of 150. So the debuffs are stronger than the buffs. So it's better to have a debuff and a buff rather than nothing. Now let's talk about how to build these champions in order to emphasize their roles. So if we look at my Athel, the first thing you'll notice is she is in fact in lifesteal gear. She needs to stay alive as long as possible. And once the entire team dies, Athel will actually solo the Demon Lord for about 4 turns. She'll survive until she gets stunned and then AoE'd back to back. If she were a little bit faster, I think that could actually go further. I could do that for more turns. So if I could get her from 164 speed to say about 190 speed, I think I could potentially solo the Demon Lord with Athel for like 7 or 8 turns. And that's incredibly important because Athel is the only 60 I have, which means she is the only one with a max tier mastery. And in this case, she has Giant Slayer. Giant Slayer has a 30% chance of inflicting bonus damage when attacking. This is equal to 3% of the target's max HP when attacking bosses. And this can happen on every hit. I've chosen Giant Slayer because she has a 3 hitting A1. So the longer her life is, the longer she can extend her life at the end of the fight, the more Giant Slayer procs she will land. And remember, every time she lands a Giant Slayer proc with her lifesteal gear on, she's going to heal herself up full. In addition, you'll notice that because she is my weaken champion, she's also a debuffer. I have her in the support tree with all of the accuracy masteries. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any accuracy elsewhere in her build. So she is sitting only at 10 accuracy, but those mastery accuracy bonuses don't kick in until the fight does, so you don't actually see those here. As far as my debuffer is concerned, he is very accurate at 178, my most accurate champion. Wukong also has decent accuracy at 123. This is going to start to be strained around hard difficulty or into brutal. At brutal, I will not have enough accuracy. I think I need 150 at brutal. So this will probably get me through hard, but I should be looking to increase the accuracy of any champions that I'm bringing in for debuffs or buff removal. My healer is just built fairly tanky. I actually do have her in a shield set because I use her in other content where that is valuable. But for the clan boss, I would probably pull her out of this particular set and either put her in all speed set to get her going very fast so that she can heal more and more and more, or put her in something like Stalwart or Resilience that's going to extend her lifespan. A reviver is only good if they're alive and they can't revive themselves, so you would need a healer or reviver to be extremely tanky in order to bring value to the team. Additionally, if you do have these healers or support champions at 6 stars, remember you also want to get them the Giant Slayer or War Master masteries. So you can see I am planning to remove Jamarsa from this team, and I'm going to use her in other locations because I'm not bringing her down the offense tree. Any support who is going up against Clan Boss, who you intend to continue going up against Clan Boss, should be running down the offense tree in masteries. So as you can see from this particular team composition, I actually have 4 champions that need accuracy against the boss. I have Deacon Armstrong, who's a debuffer. I have my Athel, who's a debuffer. By the way, if you're running Kale, he's a poisoner. He needs accuracy. Wukong needs accuracy to strip those buffs that the bosses get. And Hyria needs accuracy in order to land her poisons. So accuracy is an incredibly important stat here, and you don't want to neglect accuracy. You do have one other thing that you could do instead of doing this and putting accuracy on everybody, which is if you can have a decreased resistance on the boss. If you have one debuffer who's got good enough accuracy to land the decreased resistance, then that makes everybody else able to land their debuffs more easily without a high accuracy number. Now, there are a couple of other artifact sets I do want to discuss. So we've already talked about lifesteal. Lifesteal can be incredibly important against the early game clan boss, but eventually you're going to want to get out of lifesteal gear. Having a leech by itself should be enough to keep you healed up if you have those War Master and Giant Slayer procs. However, there are some champions that are going to act as tank or damage magnets who are going to soak up damage for your entire team. Those specifically, or most commonly, are the Ally Protect champions. Remember that Ally Protect champions are taking damage from everybody else, so you need a way to keep them alive, and sometimes they don't deal enough damage to heal themselves up based on a leech, especially if they miss their War Master or Giant Slayer proc. So there are a couple of other sets you should consider for champions like that. The first one I've already mentioned is Stalwart. Now, Stalwart gives you a 30% damage reduction from enemy AoE attacks. So the first and second attacks of the clan boss cycle are all AoEs, or both AoEs, so you can reduce the damage that you take by 30%. This is a really good set to put on an ally protector. Another excellent set is one you can get here in the Forge, and it is the Guardian set. Now, the Guardian set, the wearer absorbs 10% of all damage dealt to ally champions. So that's a little bit like an ally protection. And again, this acts in the same way, where that damage is calculated before the multipliers that the Demon Lord gets are applied to the damage. So what that means is that this is kind of like a mini ally protect. In addition, this heals the wearer by 10% of their HP every turn. So it's like a resilient set with a little ally protection on it. So it's like a regeneration set with a little ally protect on it. So regeneration is another good set that you could wear on somebody that you need to keep alive, especially if you don't have enough heals on the team. But Guardian is even stronger than that because it not only has that regeneration effect of 10% healing, but it has that extra ally protection effect. Another great set here is the Defiant set. Defiant gives you 10% defense, but also reduces the damage taken from enemy AoE attacks by 15%. So this is a little bit like a Stalwart set, but this is only a 2-piece set. So if you actually had 4 pieces of this set, like Stalwart is a 4-piece set, you would get the full Stalwart 30% damage reduction plus an additional 20% defense. So this is an even better set than a Stalwart set. You can also add one of these with a Stalwart set and get a 45% damage reduction from enemy AoEs plus an additional 10% defense. So Defiant is incredibly powerful. Even if you have just a 5-star set, you can use this. Now, one of the things to know about the Defiant set is this does come from the season Forge passes. So you can't farm this, whereas you can farm the Guardian set from the Doom Tower. I believe this drops with Griffin Feathers. Yes, Griffin Feathers. So that is the current Doom Tower rotation that's on right now. And even 5-star or even 4-star pieces in these sets can be very helpful in your early clan boss compositions. So if you can get to the Griffin in the first Doom Tower, the first Doom Tower Griffin, as long as you can get to the first Doom Tower Griffin and farm him, you can potentially get yourself some 4-star pieces here. If you can get up higher, you can get some 5-star pieces, but even a 4-star set of Guardian can do a lot of good work. Likewise, the Perception and Resilience sets you can get here from materials from the faction crypts can also be very helpful in the Demon Lord fight. The Perception will give you accuracy and speed, both of which you need for your debuffers, whereas the Resilience will make your champions who wear it tankier. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this video is Crushing Force. This is otherwise known as the clan boss's stun. So again, this is always going to be the third hit in the cycle. It goes AoE 1, AoE 2 with debuff, and then stun. The stun is a single target hit, hits pretty hard, but that stun is something that needs to be managed. In a later video this week, I will talk about all of the mechanics that go into how the Demon Lord chooses its stun target and all the different ways you can deal with that, either by directing the stun to who you want it to receive it, or finding other ways to deal with it and make it basically irrelevant. But right now, at the beginning of the game, you just have a few different ways that you can deal with it. The first way is you primarily just ignore it. You just let it hit whoever it hits. One of the things that you'll find out is that the clan boss will probably pick on the same target over and over and over again. There are reasons for that target to swap back and forth, especially if one of your champions dies. But in most cases, you'll find that one champion is clearly the favorite stun target of the Demon Lord. So in that case, the best way to keep that champion alive is to heal that champion some way. Just make sure that they're getting the focus of the heals. A second thing that you could do early on if you had the right champion is you could provide a cleanse. You could cleanse that champion after it gets stunned so that it can continue to do its attacks and potentially return health from a leech debuff out there or from lifesteal sets or what have you. The third way to deal with it would be to get a block debuffs champion. So a champion like Spirit Host can not only cleanse a debuff, but then puts up a buff, which is called a block debuffs buff. And that would prevent the stun from landing at all. The stun target would still get hit. It wouldn't negate the damage, but it would negate the debuff effect of the stun. So those are your three primary ways of dealing with the stun in the early game. And it's a good idea to try to bring one of those onto the team. The easiest one is probably heals. And then the cleanse or the block debuffs buff is a better solution and may in fact provide a lot more value in the long run. Okay, so that is it. That is everything that you need to know for early game clan boss. You can get into it right away. You're basically probably just going to take your 5 strongest champions. But one thing to consider as you're leveling up is picking champions that are going to be good for clan boss for a while. Not every champion has to be a permanently awesome solution for clan boss, but you can choose champions that are going to get you from, say, hard difficulty through brutal into nightmare, and then worry about, retuning or rebuilding your team composition later on as you acquire better and better champions and get better and better gear. So if you don't have a debuff cleanser right now, or you don't have an ally protection champion right now, that's okay. You can see I don't have that. As you get those champions, you may want to go ahead and slot them in. Again, remember that any champion that you put in your clan boss team, if you have it at level 60, it should have one of those damage dealing masteries in the offensive tree. And that's true for your supports as well as your damage dealers. So if you're running Apothecary in your clan boss team, run them down the offensive tree. If you're running an ally protector like Valkyrie, run her down the offensive tree. Whether it's a rare, an epic, or a legendary, doesn't matter. You will get so much extra damage out of those tier 6 masteries, War Master and Giant Slayer. So make sure that you put those eventually on anybody that you want to be in your clan boss team for a long time. One of the good things about those masteries, by the way, is they also work outside of clan boss. So in Hydra boss or in dungeon bosses, you're going to get some extra damage out of your supports who have those masteries as well. Okay, that is it for this first video in my Clan Boss Week series. We will be doing other videos. We'll talk about advanced techniques, team compositions, champions that you want to bring. We'll talk about speed tuning and the Clan Boss calculator. We'll talk about unkillable teams and killable teams. But for right now, this should be enough to get you started if you are a early game or mid game player. And if you are a late game player who already knows all of this, thanks for watching the video all the way to the end. That's great. That's great that you decided to support me like that, but I will have more videos that are your speed coming out this week. So don't forget to hit subscribe so you can get the notifications when those come out. Thanks so much for hanging out. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below and I will try to get them as soon as I can. I've been Colred. I will see you in another video very soon.